If PBIS concerns itself with positive behaviors, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what are those positive behaviors? And it's things like making sure that you're following directions and making sure that you're sitting quietly and you are in your seat and all these things that come from white culture. The idea of just sitting quiet and being told stuff and taking things in a passive stance is not a thing that's in with many cultures. So if we're positively enforcing these behaviors, we are by extension positively enforcing elements of white culture, which therefore keeps whiteness at the center, which is the definition of white supremacy.
The education system, the curriculum, school zoning, funding, standardized testing, all of these things can create and further lead to class and racial inequalities and impact life chances for our students. Especially as a history teacher, my students deserve somebody who is going to confront and challenge the injustices and untruths that are in our history that have led to discrimination. So yes, teaching is political because as we develop curriculum and have conversations with our students, equity and anti-racism need to be in the forefront of our minds, as well as giving our kids the means to gather factual information and form their own opinion.
And the vast majority of people in these types of programs are white. Yes, there's data to support this. Particularly for Teach for America, a lot of their campaigns involved slogans that played off of white saviorism. Now, don't tell me putting an inexperienced white savior group of teachers in hard-to-staff schools is short-sighted, because it's not. It's intentional. How else do you keep the oppressed oppressed?
Yes, America contains many cultures and many races. That is not wrong. However, the problem comes when we don't think about this idea or this argument in a racialized way when it comes to power and power dynamics. In America, as in many other parts of the Western world, whiteness is the dominant racial ideology. So when we think of power in terms of race, whiteness has the most power.
When I was in elementary school, one of my teachers kept picking on the only black boy in my class. She would often send him to the principal's office, calling him an instigator, even though he never really did anything wrong. He's a little boy. So one day after she yelled at him, I got pretty pissed off about it. And when she turned around to write on the board, I grabbed my plum and I threw it at her. The plum hit the board and it exploded everywhere. To my surprise, she turned around and started yelling at him, even though the plum came from a different direction. She then told him to go to the office, so I stood up and I let her know that it was me who had thrown the plum, and I dared her to send me to the office so I could tell the principal how racist she was. I was really confused when she didn't send me to the office. So how was it that a little black boy who was just there to learn, who literally never really did anything wrong, seemed to be more of a threat to her than somebody who literally threw a plum at her?
On educators that instances of police brutality and the murders of black and brown people by police officers is directly connected to the work that we do. Because if any of those people had been white, chances are they wouldn't have been murdered. Chances are they wouldn't have been brutalized. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at all the instances of white people, especially white men, who oftentimes are brandishing weapons and who are taken into custody alive. So much of this is wrapped up in implicit bias, and we have incredible power to change people's biases when they are young. We have to be talking about these issues in schools because every bit of it impacts our work. The ways in which we teach, the ways in which we interact with students, the practices and policies we have, the ways in which they're implemented. There's so much. And many of us are talking about this, and many of us are making these changes, but not enough of us are.